a painter who was a member of the Society of Mountain Painters, and he was also a close friend of Hodler, we mentioned before. Another view of the Lake Bourget, a beautiful lake. If you have the chance to travel in this area, it's really a very nice place. Now we approach Lyon, and Lyon, near Lyon there is an area also full of small ponds called La Dombe, and this area brought a lot of fog over the city during the second part of the 20th century. Most of these ponds have been dried out, and so the fog disappeared in Lyon. But it's interesting to see that malaria was common in this area and in Lyon until the end of the 19th century. So we arrived in Lyon. Lyon is my birthplace, and who was the capital of Gaul from 27 BC. And you see on the right of the screen here the junction between the two rivers. Here you have the Rhône, here the Saône, and there is a peninsula in the middle. So Lyon, you probably know this town, for many of you, but it's 500,000 inhabitants. The area is bigger, with nearly 2 million inhabitants. It's a Roman city, a capital of Gaul for many years, and it is at the moment the second largest city in France. It belongs to the UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is the capital of gastronomy. And you see on the top right Paul Bocuse, who is one of the famous chefs, who is still alive. I think he's no longer in the kitchen, but his restaurant is still very famous all around the world. Lyon is the birthplace of cinema with the Lumière brothers, and there is an international festival of cinema each year. But you probably know Lyon better with the famous vineyards. In the north, it is the Beaujolais. In the south are the Côtes du Rhône. Lyon is where the Interpol sits, and there is a large international agency for research on cancer, and also the place where the pharmaceutical company Mérieux is. So the two brothers Lumière are interesting characters because they were photographers, and they created the photographic plates, and they improved the kinetograph. But I reassure you, especially talking from the United States, the kinetograph was actually invented by Thomas Edison and William Dixon. But they improved it and created what they call the cinematograph. And they made some short movies. I will try to show you one in a minute. But they also invented the colored photography, what they call the autochrome. But they also participate to the improvement of medicine with the sofrotul, which is this sort of fat swab we put on burns, and actually it's still used nowadays in France. They also proposed a treatment against tuberculosis before the era of the antibiotics. So this is the sprinkler. You probably remember this film, which looks like a Laurel and Hardy film, and so it's quite one of the very first film that's done by the Frères Lumière. So Lyon is famous for his School of Art, and in the 19th century the painting School of Art was actually well developed, and one of the first directors was Nicolas Sicard, and you can see one of his paintings here, a painting of a bridge, which is the main bridge of Lyon, called Le Pont de la Guillotière, the Guillotière Bridge, and which has actually inspired many painters. You see here some views of the Pont de la Guillotière, and you can see a dome here on all these paintings, and this dome is the oldest hospital of Lyon, which actually closed its doors in 2010. I'll come back on this in a minute. So other views here, and Eugène Villon was a famous watercolorist, And he created the Society of Lyon Watercolorists, and you see one of his watercolor at the top left of the screen. Now, in the 20th century, there was a very active movement of painters in Lyon. And you see Jean Couty on the left, who was part of a group of painters called les Ignards. Ignards means ignorant in France. It was a group of painters who was against the academism in art, and they formed a very active group at the beginning of the 20th century. On the right side, you have a lovely paintings from Fusaro, who is also a painter who was very inspired by religious subject, and like was actually Jean Couty. Fusaro is still alive. Adrien Basse, here you see, is also belong to the same group of painters opposed to the academism in art. And this group survived between 1920 and 1924. It includes many famous names, and one of them may be familiar to you is Gabriel Chevalier. Gabriel Chevalier was a French writer who wrote a famous novel called Clochemerle. And Adrien Basse is also at the origin of a famous exhibition which happens once a year in Lyon called the Salon du Sud-Est. So here are the views of the bridge, and the next one is also the same group of Ignards, and especially David Girin and Henri Lachaiserais are particularly famous and beautiful painters. Henri Lachaiserais actually exhibited many times in the United States, including in New York and Washington. Then comes the Jacques Truffemus, who is probably the most famous living painter in Lyon. And you see here with my wife Jessica, he's a wonderful man. He's 93, still painting every day, 8 hours a day. And his energy and his talent are absolutely wonderful. And when I created the European Society for a Pediatric Urologist in 1989, I asked him actually to draw the logo of this society, and you can see it here. And he is a gorgeous drawer and painter, and he exhibits most of his paintings in a gallery in Paris called the Claude Bernard Gallery. Now, there are also other painters like André Cotavos, who is actually at the origin of another painting movement called the No-ists. No-ist in French is sans-ist. It is here again a movement against the academism in art. And they were quite against all the paintings with the sort of two-dimension paintings with geometrical figure, which happened with Picasso and George Braque, and they create a movement for the revival of figurative paintings. And you see their names on the slides, and among the names you can see E. Moricquan, who is my uncle, who was a photographer, a very good photographer, who actually published his photographs in the National Geographic magazine, and they belong to this group. Jacques Truffemus, you can see here as well, was a member of this group, which tried to actually revive the figurative paintings and use color to express visual pleasures and avoid the animal paintings of geometrical figures. Now, it's interesting to come back a minute on the various isms in the French paintings. Basically, until the middle of the 19th century, naturalism was the main reason to paint. And then came the Impressionism and post-Impressionism. And there are many, many subdivisions of this, of these academies. There is the Impressionism created by Claude Monet in 1872, which is painting the present time. And then came the Neo-Impressionism with these painters here, which is expressing feelings. And then there is the Expressionism, which comes just a little bit later, which favor caricature and drama of the moment, and then the symbolism with the impression of reality, the power of verbs, what they call the talking paintings, and then come the fauvisme with the arbitrary of colors, the separation of colors from the subject, from the object, and the cubism with, here again, many subdivisions. So you see it's very complicated, and you may be interested to read a very good American book called Isms, and written by Stephen Little, which is a lovely guide to understand these various subcategories of paintings. This is a painting I did of the Rhone River in 2013, and here again you can see here the dome of the old hospital. Women also painted the Rhone River, and you see a couple of the painters here, which were more recent during the 20th century. And my aunt, Hélène Maurican, who actually was trained in the art school in Lyon with Jacques Truffaut, did these various paintings of the Rhone River. She is still alive. She's a very old lady, but she is still very enthusiastic about painting. And there are also famous visitors who were interested by the city. You all know Oskar Kokoschka, who had a very hectic life, and who was the Alma Mahler lover, and who spent quite a lot of time traveling around the world. And this painting you see on the left can be seen in Washington at the Phillips Collection. Turner painted very few paintings of Lyon, but you see one on the right, and here is a sketch of one of the bridges in Lyon by Turner, but that there are very few actually documents about Turner. Now, you realize that one of the most important thing in our city is the old hospital called Hôtel Dieu, and the Hôtel Dieu at the time always sit at the other end of a bridge, because their mission was actually to welcome poor people, not only sick people, but people in need. And so the bridge was a nice way to approach these institutions. And this was created in 1184 and was renewed by a famous French architect, Jacques Germain Soufflot, in the 738. And Jacques Germain Soufflot was also the architect of Sainte-Geneviève Church in Paris, also known as Le Panthéon. And one of the most famous doctors who worked actually in l'Hôtel Dieu in Lyon was François Rabelais, who is the famous writer. He was a monk, and he was born in Touraine in the west part of France, did most of his medical studies in Montpellier, but he spent a few years in Lyon as a doctor, and he was appointed as médecin de l'Hôtel Dieu de Notre-Dame de la Pitié du Pont du Rhône, which clearly shows the link between the bridge and the hospital. He wrote this book, some of you know, called Pantagruel and then Gargantua, which were printed in Lyon. And it's a very interesting book during the 16th century and the Renaissance period. And he said that laughter is exclusive to men. Live happy, which I think we should keep as our main motto. And in his epitaph is, I have nothing, I owe a lot, I leave the rest to the poor. Draw the curtain, the farce is over. Now, Claude Bernard is also a famous doctor who worked near the Rhone River, and he gave his name to our university in Lyon. He is the father of experimental medicine, and I think the principle he wrote at the time are probably still very much valid nowadays. And other famous doctor, you probably don't know his name, but is Charles Pravaz, who is an orthopedic surgeon who invented the syringe and the hollow needle, And this needle and syringe were made by a company called Charrière, and probably this name is familiar to many of you, as we still talk about Charrière to measure the size of needles nowadays in many places, though either the French or the Charrière. And he created an orthopedic hospital in the south of the city to actually correct anomaly of the spine. And he invented some horrible instruments you can see on the slides to straighten the scoliosis in children and adults. Another controversial figure in Lyon is Alexis Carrel. He was really a pioneer in vascular surgery. He was Nobel Prize of Medicine in 1912, and he worked closely with Henry Drysdale-Dakin and developed a method to treat burns before the era of antibiotics. He was a close friend of Charles Lindbergh, and they both work on extracorporeal circulation. He created the first mobile hospital, which was used by the British in North Africa during the war. Unfortunately, he wrote a book called L'Homme c'est inconnu, where he